You're Dr. Colin Crombie, senior resident of the Fulchester South Hospital.
That's correct.
Dr. Crombie, could you please describe to us the events that happened on the night of November the 3rd last?
I was called to examine a patient, Charles Laker, who'd been admitted earlier. He was in a state of complete collapse. He seemed to be in great pain and was experiencing difficulty in breathing. In spite of immediate treatment, his condition rapidly got worse. He was admitted to the intensive care unit. 2 hours later, he died.
Dr. Crombie, during this time, did Mr. Laker have the opportunity to explain his condition to you?
Yes. Given oxygen, he recovered sufficiently to be able to talk briefly. He told me he'd been bewitched.
Today in Fulchester Crown Court, Adelaide Vincent stands accused of the manslaughter of Charles Laker. It is alleged that, being the maiden or leader of a witch coven, she did curse his life, thereby bringing about conditions that directly or indirectly led to his death.
He said that for some time now he'd been a member of a local witchcraft coven, and the previous evening the maiden or leader had put a curse on him, and this was the sole reason for his physical condition.
I see, Doctor. And what confidence did you place on this diagnosis exactly?
Well, I thought it was nonsense, obviously. Yet I'm bound to say now that despite the continued efforts of a skilled survival team, Charles Laker died 2 hours after making that claim. And none of us at the hospital can suggest a medical reason why.
But let's be reasonable, Doctor. Charles Laker must have died from some identifiable physical cause.
Well, if you mean that the heart stopped, respiration ceased, and deoxygenation of the brain took place within minutes, yes, my lord. But these are the physical conditions that accompany every death. For doctors, it's a matter of what might cause these conditions.
Yes, I see. And in Laker's case, you could establish nothing?
Nothing at all, my lord.
That's very odd, Doctor.
Extremely. That seems to be the point, in fact.
Continue, please, Miss Tate.
My lord? Now, we've already had introduced as evidence the pathologist's report relating to the post-mortem conducted on Charles Laker. You are familiar with that, Dr. Crombie?
Naturally.
It would seem to bear out your contention that nothing precise can be established concerning the cause of death.
Yes. Considering the symptoms that Laker had exhibited, the pathologist at first tested for the presence of poison, possibly of a gradual, non-corrosive nature, but there was no evidence of anything like that. Nor was there any internal lesion that mightn't at first have revealed itself. Laker's was, in fact, an extremely healthy body for a man of his years.
Did you see Charles Laker's medical record later?
Yes, it was forwarded to us by his GP.
And did it confirm your judgment that he was a thoroughly healthy man?
Oh, no doubt of it. The history was right up to date. There'd been a physical examination not 3 months earlier. Laker was a careful man who seems to have insisted on biannual checkups.
What, in fact, was entered on the death certificate for Charles Laker, Dr. Crombie?
Why, cardiac failure following survival treatment that didn't succeed.
And as the doctor who observed Charles Laker when he died, were you entirely happy with this entry?
Well, not entirely, no. Scientifically, of course, there's very little else one could say. But, well, it seems that death by cursing may be possible.
Why do you say that, Doctor?
There's a growing medical opinion to that effect. My interest in the matter stems from the fact that at Fulchester South nowadays we have to deal very largely with members of the immigrant community.
You speak of a growing medical opinion, Doctor. But how large a body of opinion would this be, do you think?
Oh, in this country, very small, my lord. The journal Medicine, Science and the Law recently published an article detailing the experiences of doctors working with very much the same cross-section of the public as I am. The article was, well, disturbing. Its conclusion seemed to be that, in certain cases anyway, we might have to accept death by cursing as a medical and legal reality.
What exactly is the status of this journal, Medicine, Science and Law, Dr. Crombie?
It's the official organ of the British Academy of Forensic Sciences.
I see. Now, in countries other than Britain, does medical knowledge in your opinion, accept the possibility of death by cursing.
Oh, yes. Doctors who worked in Africa will tell you it happens frequently enough. The same is true of parts of Asia and the Pacific Islands. Medical men have even reported cases in New Zealand among the Maoris, who, comparatively speaking, are highly civilized people.
Is it then your professional opinion, Dr. Crombie, that Charles Laker could have died as a result of a curse put on him by a supposed witch?
Well, I know that Charles Laker told me that a curse had been put on him. I also know there is no medical reason why he should be dead today.
Thank you, Dr. Crombie, that's all.
Dr. Crombie, supposing we allow for one moment that in certain curious cases death by cursing might actually be possible, how would it operate exactly? Can you tell us?
It operate?
What would be the mechanism? The medical mechanism, Doctor? I mean, curse isn't a physical cause of death, is it? Like the edge of a blade, a poisoned dart?
Well, I suppose the mechanism would be that the curse implants some sort of dread in the mind of the subject, which in due course leads to a deterioration of health.
But why?
Why?
Yes, why? If I announced that, contrary to appearances, I was in fact a witch doctor, and I put a curse on you, well, presumably the effect would be negligible, and yet with certain other people it wouldn't be. Now, why? Is the curse real, actually effective?
No, of course not. That's mumbo-jumbo.
Then why? Are the people concerned of a special type, perhaps?
Well, naturally, they would have to be of a type who subscribe to the superstitions concerned.
Susceptible people, in other words.
Yes, if you like.
Was Charles Laker a susceptible person?
Well, how on earth can I answer that?
Come, Doctor, you've had his medical history. You've told us that he insisted on biannual checkups.
Yes.
Overdoing things a little, isn't it?
I don't think so.
I've
Careful.
also
was
made
the
a
word.
note that he visited his doctor a good deal over complaints that turned out to be entirely imaginary. Suspected slip disc, October 72. Suspected hernia, March 73.
Well, some people are like that. Every doctor has to deal with one or two.
Yes, exactly. The hypochondriacs.
I didn't say that.
Oh, come, Doctor. Surely you'd agree that Charles Laker was a hypochondriac.
I didn't know the man until he was
But you must
seriously
have known
ill.
that he worried unnecessarily about his health. And you must know, too, that hypochondria has close affinities with the mechanism of death by cursing.
I don't agree with that
Being
at all.
simple auto-suggestion in both cases.
That's absurd
Please,
oversimplification.
Doctor, either a man is killed by something you can put a name to, or he kills himself. No two ways about it. Bad science makes for worse law.
You appear to be making some inept reference to the medical syndrome known as psychosomatism. But psychosomatism begins from within the person. Death from cursing has its origins outside the individual. The subject doesn't want to die, you know. But the curse is pronounced, and for some reason or other that we don't understand, he does die.
Yes. Thank you, Doctor. No further questions.
Miss Tate,
No further questions, my lord.
you may stand down, Doctor.
I call John Terry Saxon, my lord.
John Terry Saxon, please.
What is your religion?
CV.
Take the testament in your right hand and read aloud the words on this card.
I swear by Almighty God, the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
You're John Terry Saxon, and you live at 42 Bread Lane, Fulchester Central.
That's right.
How are you employed, Mr. Saxon?
I'm a journalist on the Fulchester Record.
Are you acquainted with the accused, Adelaide Vincent?
Yes, you could say we've met on socially.
Shortly before his death, did you also meet the deceased in this case, Charles Laker?
That's right, too. I met Laker as a result of a phone call I received at the record office on October the 20th last. It was a man who would only say that he was an accountant who worked locally and that he had a sensational news story for me if I was interested. We arranged to meet the following night at a pub called the Jug and Bottle in the Brightly Junction area.
And did you keep this appointment, Mr. Saxon?
At 8 p.m. Yeah, it was a weird place to meet an accountant, a tiled navvies pub. Well, you know Brightly Junction. Laker was hiding behind a belted raincoat and a pint of mild. I spotted him as a social refugee straight off.
What did Mr. Laker have to tell you?
He said he was a member of a local witchcraft coven led by a woman, and that there was to be a meeting of this coven, rather like a sex orgy as he described it, coming up on October the 31st, and there'd be some prominent people involved. And that if I liked, he'd see that I got a grandstand seat for it, provided we were prepared to guarantee him absolute anonymity.
Why do you think he made that stipulation, Mr. Saxon?
He was scared stiff. It was obvious in his every move. He said it was imperative I guaranteed him anonymity. He seemed to be terrified what might happen to him if he was found out. He seemed to be frightened for his life.
I see, Mr. Saxon. So Charles Laker told you of some kind of sex orgy that was due to take place on the night of October the 31st and offered to provide you with its location, hour, and so on. Is that correct?
That's right.
In the belief that it would all make a sensational newspaper story for you.
Well, wouldn't it? I mean, especially if he was right about the mayor and corporation being involved. I mean, I could even see the Nationals.
My lord, I must object.
Yes, indeed. Mr. Saxon, you must be most careful what you say in that connection.
Oh, I didn't mean the mayor and corporation literally, my lord.
Oh, well, I'm delighted to hear it. Miss Tate, perhaps the court should be given some indication at this point of exactly how much naming of names you think is likely to be strictly necessary.
Well, as things have turned out, my lord, remarkably little. I had hoped to call in evidence other members of the coven, but in the event it has proved practically impossible to identify them.
Impossible to identify them?
Yes, my lord.
But how do you mean exactly?
Well, apparently they attend meetings masked and address each other by pseudonyms. The accused is apparently known as Hecate. Another coven member I have managed to identify is known as Demeter. Charles Laker was Aron, an ancient Celtic wizard, my lord.
Yeah, undoubtedly, yeah. But, well, the identities of the coven members must have been known to the, what is it she calls herself, the maiden? I mean, how else were they enrolled in the first place?
Well, your lordship raises a shrewd point, but unhappily we lack information on it at the moment. Perhaps we can hope for enlightenment later.
I see. Oh, very well, continue then, Miss Tate.
My lord? Mr. Saxon, in offering to make you privy to the activities of the witch coven, did Mr. Laker expect any sort of reward from you?
You mean, did he ask for any money, a payoff?
Yes, well, it's not unusual, is it?
No, but Laker wasn't like that. All through our talk in the jug and bottle, he just struck me as, well, just being anxious to get something off his chest. It was as though he was guilty about the experiences he'd had in the coven, and that he just wanted to expose them to me to clear his conscience.
Did he say to you at any point that his conscience was troubled?
He said all his life he'd tried to be moral, only members of the coven weren't. They were all only in it for the sex, and he hated that.
I see. Now, you've told us that Charles Laker gave you the time and place of this particular coven meeting on October the 31st. Did you, in fact, attend?
Secretly, yes. The venue was in a clearing in the Rillingford Forest. I got there about 10 to hide myself, and things were due to start at 11. After a while, various coven members began to show up. They were wearing domino masks on their faces, so I couldn't recognize them, and long white druid-type garments. I recognized Laker from his dumpy figure. Anyway, a fire was lit, and a tall woman stepped forward and started to read a chant from a book. Part in English, I think, part in Latin. She wasn't wearing a mask.
Do you see that same woman in court today?
Yes, yes. Over there, Adelaide Vincent.
I see. Carry on, please.
Well, after a while, the group, the crowd, whatever they're called, began to respond to this chant. There were about 20 people altogether, about 14 men, 5 or 6 women. The responses were not words, they were just sounds, sighs and groans. And then they all started to revolve in a circle around the fire, rather like a dance. And then it got faster, and people started to take their clothes off.
And what did you do then, Mr. Saxon?
I started taking pictures, of course. I'm a newspaper man. But the firelight must have reflected off the lens or something. I don't know. Anyway, I was spotted. A half-naked young woman shrieked, jabbed a finger in my direction, and before you could say double, double, toil and trouble, 2 hefty specimens had raced over to where I was hiding, grabbed me and thrust me out into the clearing up in front of the maiden, the accused, that is.
And how did the coven members react to this?
Oh, they gasped like faulty traction engines and headed off for the dark in the bushes. I got the distinct impression that they didn't relish the idea of a stranger being able to recognize them from their birthmark on their right shoulder or whatever.
And the accused?
Well, she just looked at me as if I was something the cat had dragged up. She snatched my camera away and tore the film from it. The Fulchester record was plastered all over the camera, so she didn't need to ask who I was or what I was doing there. She just demanded to know how I'd found out where the coven was taking place.
And you replied?
Well, at this point, I'd like to say that I didn't know too much about witches and covens. They may have even turned vicious
Please,
on me.
Mr. Saxon, what did you reply?
Well, I didn't see why I should sweat alone, so I dropped poor Laker in it.
You mean you told the accused that Charles Laker had supplied you with the whereabouts of this particular coven meeting and suggested that you might find the proceedings interesting? I see. And what was the accused's reaction to this?
She went white. All the colour drained from her face. She shouted, "Find her on! Find her on!" Just like that. A minute later, Laker was hustled up, shaking like a jelly, protesting innocence. She tore the mask from his face and announced he'd betrayed the coven, and she had no further choice but to curse his life.
To curse his life. Now, was this the exact expression she used?
Her actual words were, "This man is an intruder, but you have betrayed Hecate. You shall both be cursed as to the life, the blood, the house, and the hearth."
I see. Thank you. And then what happened?
Well, I was given the rush, handed back what was left of my camera, and thrust into the outer darkness. The last I saw of Laker, he was on his knees in front of the accused, pleading with her not to curse him. She was looking at him with a face like stone.
You saw Charles Laker begging the accused not to curse him?
Over and over again. I thought he was acting like a fool at the time, but there, you know, maybe he knew something I didn't.
Thank you, Mr. Saxon.
Now, Mr. Saxon, is the point of the matter that on October the 31st you failed to identify any of the supposedly prominent members of the witchcraft coven?
Yeah, that's what I said. They were all wearing domino masks, and such pictures as I'd managed to get had been destroyed.
Which is obviously the reason why nothing ever appeared in the Fulchester record about it, correct?
Well, my editor said, what had I got? A half-baked story about some people dancing starkers round a fire in the wood. It might add up to a silly season feature on naturism, but it didn't add up to a juicy scandal.
No sex orgies, in other words.
It was early days when I got the shove, mind. I mean, maybe later when they got...
No, Mr. Saxon, we aren't concerned with later, nor with earlier, nor with anything except what you can positively testify to, and you can't testify to any sex orgies, can you?
No, I guess I can't.
No, thank you. Now, you tell us that when you left the coven meeting on October the 31st, Charles Laker was on his knees before the defendant, pleading with her over and over not to curse him.
That's right.
Now, how about yourself? Weren't you similarly disposed?
Me?
Yes, well, unless I misheard your testimony, you were to be cursed as well, weren't you? Yes. You shall both be cursed as to the life, the blood, the house, and the hearth. Were you cursed too, do you think?
Damned if I know.
You mean you wouldn't care if you had been?
Of course not. I don't go in for all that codswallop.
So that's your understanding of things. The curse works if you believe in it, fails if you don't.
I object, my lord. Counsel is eliciting an opinion from the witness.
Yes, Mr. Lotterby, you know better than that.
My lord, I'm simply anxious to point out that Mr. Saxon appears to have been cursed along with Charles Laker. Well, if counsel for the prosecution is insistent that the curse was effective in the case of Charles Laker, then I feel we should ask ourselves why it was not so in the case of Mr. Saxon.
Yes, perhaps, Mr. Lotterby, perhaps. But at the proper time, and certainly not in this manner.
Mr. Saxon, you find yourself in perfect health at this moment, do you?
Perfect, yes.
Mm-hmm. You've been in good health for some time.
Yes.
At any time between the dates October the 31st and November the 2nd, did you suffer any sickness or decline in your usual high standard?
As I recall, on the morning of November the 2nd, I did feel a bit here and there.
Yes?
I bumped into a few old chums the night before, and I told them of my experiences at the hands of a witch. It seemed to make us remarkably thirsty.
Yes, I see. No further questions.
You may stand down, Mr. Saxon.
I call Anne Silk, my lord.
Anne Silk, please.
You are Anne Silk and you live at Haddersley Mansions, Bellinggrove, Fulchester.
That's right.
What is your employment, Miss Silk?
Oh, I do different things. Modelling, I've appeared on television once or twice. A bit of local broadcasting.
You're basically in the entertainments business.
Yes.
Are you also a member of the Fulchester Witch Coven?
I shouldn't have been asked to come to court. It's not fair. What I do with my private life is...
Miss Silk, you must answer the question. Are you a member of the Fulchester Witchcraft Coven or not?
Yes.
You.
Actually, I'm the main assistant to the maiden, Hecate. Adelaide Vincent, that is. I'm called Demeter.
Thank you, Miss Silk. And how long have you been a coven member?
2 years.
What made you join?
Well, I'd always been interested in that sort of thing. You know, mysteries, the occult. But people have the wrong idea of witches. They think it's all old crones standing over steaming pots, breathing hatred and wickedness everywhere. But it's not like that at all. It's nature, really. Getting back to the forces of nature that people these days ignore or don't care about. Natural things.
Do you believe in magic, Miss Silk?
I believe that if you serve the forces of nature, then the forces of nature serve you. Yes.
Now, what does it mean to be the maiden of the coven?
Well, all covens are founded round a witch with real power. It can be a man or a woman. If it's a woman, she's called the maiden.
In this coven is Adelaide Vincent, the witch with real power?
Oh, yes. Her power can be frightening sometimes. I've seen it at Sabbats.
At Sabbats. Now, what are they exactly? Are they special coven meetings?
Yes, they're very special meetings. They occur a few times a year.
I see. What happens then?
Well, all that's secret. I'm not supposed to talk about that.
I'm afraid you will have to, Miss Silk. If the information is relevant to the case, the court has a right to insist upon it.
Let me put the question in another way, Miss Silk. Have you ever at these Sabbats had or been required to have sexual relations with any of the men present?
Yes. She makes us. She calls up the devil, and then she makes us worship him in the devil's way. Poor Charles Laker knew that. That's why he wanted to make it public. And that's why he died. That's why she killed him.
The case of the Queen against Vincent will be resumed tomorrow in the Crown Court.